born on September 21st, 1941. And according to my dad, it was a wonderful, bright and sunny day. Hot, actually. And I was named Elizabeth Marie Tippery. I was named for my mom. My Aunt Nellie told me years later that my dad was really happy to have a girl first, so that made me feel kind of good because I never had heard that. My mom always referred to me as her last rose of summer because when I was born it was the last day of summer. So that's how I started my life, as the last rose of summer. I was born, of course, just a few months before World War II, when Pearl Harbor was attacked. And one of my first memories is of my dad. Because he was a farmer, he was not drafted. He was part of the war effort, though. And I remember being up really late at night with my mom, fixing Dad a supper to take with him, because he would drive to Beaver, Oregon, to load warships. And he'd go, I think, around 10 or 11 at night and come home in the morning around, I don't know, 5 or 6, something like that, to milk cows and stuff, and work around the farm, and then he'd go back again the next night. And he did that for a long time. I really don't know what year that was, but I know I was pretty little, probably maybe 3, if that old. One of my other memories about the war was my Uncle Al Carrasco and Frank Carrasco. Al, of course, is Mom's brother, and Frank was the son of one of my mom's older brothers coming home from the war, because I was over at Grandma Carrasco. Grandma lived just down the road from us, and they came, and Grandma was just so overjoyed to see them. And then I remember there was a big party later at Grandma's, and we had a whole bunch of family come to see both of them. And there was a big celebration. Uncle Al didn't even know my sister had been born during the war. Another early memory I have is when my little baby brother, Davy, died. I think I must have been, I don't know, maybe 3. I'm not sure because I was just a little girl. But in those days, I remember that we used to ride in the back of the car, but we didn't have seat belts and all that. And I usually stood up behind my mom's seat in front. And I remember patting her fur coat, because she had a big, well, not her fur coat, but she had a big fur collar on her coat. And I was patting it and touching her shoulder like this because Mom was crying. And it was because my brother Davy had died of a crib death. And he was just a little over a month old, and it just devastated her, of course. And that was another memory I have from very, very young, just because my mom was so sad and my dad was sad, and it was a rough time for both of them. But in October of 1945, my sister Mabel was born, and that was a happy time. And of course, I was a little over 4 years old when she came, and my great-grandma Cook came to our house to make food for my dad and to take care of me while Mom was in the hospital. And in those days, you know, moms went to the hospital and they were there like 4 or 5 days after they gave birth. And I remember going upstairs to see Grandma Cook, and she'd always tell me, you have to slow down when you talk because you talk too much and you talk too fast. And I guess I still do that to this day. So I started out young, being a real talky kid. We go see Great-Grandma quite a bit when we go up to Grandma and Grandpa Tippery's in Silver Lake. And I would run into their house, and my Aunt Mabel tells me that I always tripped over their doormat and I always had skinned-up knees at Grandma and Grandpa's. But I'd run in and I'd run upstairs to see Grandma Cook, because she'd be sitting at her spinning wheel and spinning, and that always fascinated me. She was just a really neat lady, and I loved visiting with Grandma Cook. I spent a lot of time at my Grandma Tippery's. I love to be there. I go into the woods with her, and she taught me about wildflowers and things, and we take these hikes. And I just would spend like a couple of weeks there every summer and enjoyed being around her so much. And then I go to Grandma Carrasco's down the road. I was always running away to Grandma Carrasco's. And I loved to play in her yard because she had flowers that looked like a jungle, and it looked like a beautiful stream running through it to me, to a kid's eyes. Later, I found out it wasn't really a stream, but it was drainage from the kitchen sink. You know, not really dirty sewage, but stuff you wouldn't want a kid to play in. But I didn't know any better, and I loved being over at Grandma's. My mom was a great mom. She'd do things like take us kids out in the woods, and we'd have a bonfire and roast wieners or something. One of my fun memories was Mom and Dad were building a fence down along the lane, and they dug a hole, and then Mom brought down potatoes and some meat wrapped in foil, and I think some kind of a vegetable like carrots or something, and put them down into this fire and let them cook. And then later, they pulled it all out of the fire pit, and we stayed down there and had supper. This was on a summer night, out in the dark, under the stars, around the fire, and that was one of the things we did at home. We did a lot of neat things. Dad would take us in the wintertime on the sleigh behind our work horses and pull us through the field. We played a lot of cards at night. This is when my sister and I were there. We would go to the river, and we'd have picnics during haying season especially. Mom would make a big picnic lunch, and we'd go to the river in inner tube all afternoon. And Dad would do it too, even though he liked to get his work done. He'd take time for us to all have fun together as a family. We just growing up like that was wonderful. Being out in the country, Mom would let us out the door in the morning, and we'd run loose until she called us in for lunch. She had a whistle, so we'd hear it. We'd be up in the woods. She never worried about us. We just were out there. In 1949, my brother was born, Mike. So we had, my sister and I were always kind of playing pranks on him. Like one of the things we did was we dressed him up like a bride and promised him we wouldn't take his picture. We put like a lace curtain around him and a veil. And we took his picture, and he got so mad at us. He was about 3, and he stomped his feet. But we did, sisterly things. We're kind of not really mean to him, but we kind of tricked him all the time. My sister and I, one summer, we wanted some white sandals. And Mom and Dad kind of taught us, if we really wanted something bad, that we didn't really have to have, we had to work for it. So we had a big orchard, and there were wild turnips growing out there. And they told us if we go out and pull the wild turnips, we'd get a penny for every plant that we pulled, and we could earn money to buy our sandals. So we took our little red wagon, and we went out to the orchard and started pulling turnips. And my sister and I were out there from breakfast until we came in the house for lunch, and then we went back and pulled more turnips. Pulled and pulled and pulled most of the day. And I don't know how many we pulled by then, but certainly not enough to buy our white sandals. But Mom and Dad took us into town and got us white sandals the next day, because mostly they were trying to teach us to work, even though, of course, we couldn't earn enough at a penny a turnip to buy 2 pairs of sandals. One time my sister and I were up in the woods picking blackberries up above our house. We had the little wild blackberries. And we picked and picked and picked, and the Mom said have us come down for lunch, and we went back after lunch. We left the bucket there, about half full. And when we went back, it was crawling with ants, and we were so upset. Oh my gosh, I can remember so well. We were crying. We went down to the house and told Mom, she said, just go back and get the blackberries and bring them down. So we did. We brought them down, and she washed them really well and got all the blackberries out, and she made us a pie. But we were just devastated about that. And that's kind of how we were. When Mikey got big enough, the three of us would go over, and we had what we call our cubby holes. My dad had 50 acres, and then on the other side, down beyond Grandma's, we had 100 acres. And we go over to the 100 acres, and there were some big old cubby holes on this road that had been an old railroad in the past. And Mabel, Mike, and I decided those were ours, and we each get into one, and we call them our cubby holes, and we get down in these holes in the dirt. And I'm not sure what we did exactly, but that's just one of our adventures. And then we go over to the pond, and we catch pollywogs, catch those. Just did all kinds of great things. Usually I was the one that fell in the mud for some reason, and the kids, Mabel and Mike always laughed at me, but, it was such a prissy little thing. I'm amazed I even was over there, but I was out there with the kids. So that's kind of a little bit about my childhood. It was just a really wonderful childhood. When I was about 7 or 8, I showed my first cow, or heifer I should say, at the Rose Valley Fair, and I won a blue ribbon and learned to lead a cow around the ring, or a heifer. And as soon as I was old enough, I joined 4-H, and my project was dairy cattle. And I showed cattle with my dad. My dad and mom had milking shorthorns that were prize winners. And I'd go to the fairs and show them. And I would do really well. In fact, I went to the state, the state fair in Puyallup for dairy. And I won junior showmanship trophy one year, when I was there. And then when I was older, I won the senior showmanship trophy. And that's a trophy that you win not just for how good your animal is, but how well you can show it and set it up and things. And I used to take my cows out. I had one I loved named Gloria. And I'd take Gloria out every night, and I'd practice with her on the halter and get her so she would stop perfectly and set up perfectly. And I was I just did that, and that's how I earned money for school clothes, because I won a lot of prize money, and I would buy all my own school clothes from the time I was about, I guess in 7th or 8th grade. I bought my own school clothes, and believe me, I had the nicest clothes of any of the girls in the class, so I did pretty well. And Dad, I know they had to pay to have my cattle there and all that, but I got to keep all my prize money. I went to high school, of course, in September 1955. I wasn't even 14 yet, but I turned 14 right after I started high school. And when I went through, I met a bunch of girls, became really close friends. One of them that I met had in two classes, Dixie McCoy, was my best friend, and we're still best friends today, 55 years later. And I had a group of girls that were my very good friends, and we've kept in touch all these years. We used to meet at least twice a year, and maybe we'd go away on a little trip together to Seattle or something, and or just go to each other's houses and get together and talk and have lunch. And there's just this clique of girls, and we were popular, and we had fun, and we were in a club called Try Hawaii, and we went to outings to the beach in different places. We had slumber parties. We just had a really great time. I had several different boyfriends in high school. When I was a sophomore, in my sophomore year, I started dating Bill Whitty, and fell madly in love with him. I felt bad for him because there was a talk around school about what had happened to his parents, and it was pretty awful, although I didn't know him at the time. But anyway, I fell in love with him, and unfortunately, about a year later, after we started dating, I got pregnant. I was 16, and we got married in July after he graduated. And in December, I had my son, Bill Jr., And even though I was just 17 years old, I just was in love with my son. I just loved my baby so much. And it was a really happy time for me. Um, and, you know, we had a life together. We rented some places and lived, and he was working sometimes. And then he got a job in Seattle through a family friend, so we went to Seattle for a while. But that didn't work out, so then we came back to stay at my folks because the job didn't work out for him when we were in Seattle. And we were at my parents' house one day. Bill had gone to work, and I was down at the house doing laundry for my mom. And Dad and Mom had gone up into the woods. They were felling some trees. And Dad came down, and a horrible thing had happened. He was felling a tree, and it came over and hit my mom on the head. And he came down to tell me I had to call a neighbor to come up and help him bring Mom down out of the woods, and I had to call an ambulance to get them out to our house. So I did that. Well, Dad went back up there to be with her, and then our neighbor came over, and he went up there, and it kind of made like a way of getting Mom down there, kind of like a carrier. And they brought Mom down, and it was bad. It was really, really bad. Mom was in shock, of course. And anyway, the ambulance took her into the hospital in Longview. And I would go in and visit her every day, and I'd be with her. And then on the 5th day, Bill's brother, who was kind of a loser guy, anyway, Harvey, was in a little fender bender accident and was in the hospital, in the other hospital that was there then. So I had been with Mom that afternoon, but I wanted to go back that night. And Bill says, no, we're going to go see Harvey. Well, so we did. I didn't see my mom. And we went home because the visiting hours were over. And that night about 11 o'clock, the phone rang, and I answered it because Dad was upstairs, and we were sleeping downstairs. It was the hospital calling to say that they had to take Mom by ambulance to Portland. So I got up and I got ready, and Dad, and we drove in, and we went down to Portland to the hospital. In fact, I think, anyway, we were down there, and Aunt Cecilia came over to the hospital and were with us. And then they brought me home. Dad had to stay there. He had somebody else home to milk the cows, as I remember. And I stayed there because I had Billy at the house, and I got Mabel and Mike off to school. We were just trying to have kind of a normal day. And anyway, Dad came home that afternoon, and I asked him how Mom was, and he said, she's with the angels. I guess that was the first really horrible thing that happened in my life. That was so hard. All these years later, I'm still crying over it. Sorry. Anyway, it was hard. My mom died, and it was like the whole world kind of ended right there. Anyway, we got through that, and after that, Bill and I were able to get a place of our own, rent our own home and move out, and, we were working and everything. The one good thing that Dad's told me, and I know it's so true, that he was so thankful that she had a chance to at least see her first grandchild. She loved Billy so much, and it was just, I was happy that I'd had him, and she was able to have a little guy to love. After that, not long after, actually, Dad got remarried in June to Virginia, and things kind of were different. Anyway, they were married, and then Bill and I were in our own house, and I just had my kids. Was pregnant with Jamie, and had her in August of 1960, and was so thrilled. I was just so excited to have a girl. They could hear me through the whole hospital just yelling, "Oh, it's a girl, it's a girl, it's a girl." I was so thrilled to have a little girl. And I just loved my baby so much. And my sister Mabel came to be with me to kind of help take care of everything because unfortunately my husband wasn't around that much. He'd take off and be with his buddies or other people at the time. Anyway, I would take my kids and we'd go into town and everybody say, "Oh, what beautiful children you have." And I was just so, so proud of them and I loved them. Not too long after that, I think Jamie was about 2, I realized that to take care of myself and my kids, I was going to have to work because Bill had some habits that were not real good for a family, and I couldn't even count on him to support us sometimes. So I went to try to get a job of all things at a McDonald's because there was a new one opening in Longview, and they wouldn't hire me because I hadn't finished high school. I had gotten married after my junior year. So anyway, we had a neighbor across the street who happened to be married to a guy who had been in my high school class. And she was going back to high school that summer to take a CWP class. And she said, "Why don't you come with me?" So I did. And I completed that class. And I only needed 3 credits to graduate. So I actually went back to regular school that year. I got some money from my mom's estate. I was 21. And I got, I think, like, I don't know, $400 or something. It wasn't very much. Maybe it was $1,500. Anyway, whatever I got. I bought a car for myself, and I went back to high school with my sister and finished and graduated with her class. And I graduated with a 3.2 average, which was pretty good. You know, I would have maybe had better, but I'd had an incomplete when I was a freshman because of sewing and home ec, which I had to bring up to a D. Other than that, I had really good grades. Anyway, I finished high school, and when I finished, I had been in a secretarial class, and we all went to Weyerhaeuser for testing, and they hired me on the spot. That was my first job at Weyerhaeuser. And I went to work. They put me in a room to do filing that needed to be done, and I completed it in like 3 days. They were amazed, and so I got a promotion within 3 days into invoicing. So I was in the invoicing department, and I worked there for about a year, and then we got moved to, Bill got a job in Portland, so we moved to Tigard. And in Tigard, then I got a job at, I went to work in Portland for a lumber brokerage firm and worked there. My kids were doing pretty well. Billy was in kindergarten, and Jamie was 4, and I had him in child care for a while, but it wasn't a real good situation, so they went to stay with Cecilia during the day, and I think that was maybe a lot better. So that was our time in Tigard, and then from there, Bill got transferred to Seattle, so I quit my job, and we went to Seattle, and I did not work in Seattle. I wanted to stay home with my kids and be with them. So we lived there, and then from there, we moved to Clatskanie. And when we were in Clatskanie, Bill's boss told him about some houses in Vancouver that were for sale, so we moved to Vancouver, and we stayed in those houses we bought that house and lived there for a long time. During the time I was with Bill, we did things together as a family. It wasn't all, you know, we had some good times. I still loved him. I wanted to be married to him. We go on picnics, and he liked to go fishing, so we go fishing, and we did, you know, things like that. We go to California quite a bit because he had family, his mother and father had family in California. So we go on vacations to California. I don't remember ever going anywhere else on a vacation. Oh, yes, I do. Once we went to Canada because my sister and brother-in-law, he graduated from college and was working in Alberta, Canada. So we went up there. But after that, our marriage really unraveled. So we were married about 16 years when I filed for divorce, and we divorced after that. And those were rough times because I had to work a lot just to keep a roof over our head and keep things going. And Billy Jr. was starting to get into drugs. And it was, not a really great time. I it just, I had tried to stay home with him for a while before that because I wanted to be home with my children. I started working at Clark College and I wanted to be home. So I quit working, and the kids, Bill was in Cub Scouts, so I became a Cub Scout leader. Jamie was in Camp Fire, so I tried to do things for Camp Fire and participate with her. But I had realized after a while that I had to go back to work because their dad wasn't helping out anymore with support of any kind, even when we were still married. So I went back to work, and from there on, I just kept working at Clark College. And I also kind of moonlighted at a bar part-time just to keep things, keep it going for us. I was single for 10 years. When I was working at a bar Friday nights, and then walked this really cute guy, and he sat in my section. Well, that was my David Johnson. And here's how we met. This is on April 13th, 1984. I go over to wait on him, and he said, "Do you have something special?" And I thought, oh, for God's sake, this is some guy, with some kind of a line. And I gave him a look, and I says, "What?" He says, no, that's a Scotch. And I didn't believe him. So I went up to the bartender and said, is there a Scotch called something special? And he says, "Yeah, there is, but we don't have it." So it wasn't a line. He really did want some Scotch called something special. So anyway, I had to give him something, give him a different kind of a Scotch that he ordered, some other special Scotch that he liked. And we talked and talked and talked that night. Every time I had a little break and had time, we'd just talk. We just started talking. And he wanted to take me to breakfast after I got off work at 2 in the morning. And I said, "No, I really can't." Well, I had my boyfriend at the time was going to come over and be with me, so I couldn't go out with him. But I said, "But I can go out with you Sunday afternoon." So that Sunday he came over, and we went out, and we were just going to go to this place I liked and have a drink. And then it just evolved. We just started talking, and we had dinner. And in those days, nobody really had a lot of credit cards. So we were eating dinner, and I said, "Well, I'd like dessert. I'd like chocolate mousse." And he looked at me and said, he said, "I just don't have enough money with me to." I said, "Oh, that's okay. I've got money." So I bought his dessert. And anyway, after that, it blossomed. In May, I was in a fashion show at Clark College, and my parents hadn't even met him yet. And I looked out in the audience, and there is Dad and Virginia and my friend Susan sitting together, and they didn't know each other. And I looked out, and there was David sitting with him, and he didn't even know who they were. He was just happened to sit next to him, which is a coincidence. So after the show, I introduced him, and Dad and Jenny and Dave and I were going to go to dinner at Cattle Company. So we went to Cattle Company, and then he had to leave to go pick up Scott, who was playing Babe Ruth baseball that night, and pick up Scott and take him home. So he left, and while he was gone, I told Dad and Jenny, I said, Dave and I, we're going to get married. And they looked at me like they were shocked because I'd been single for 10 years and never talked about getting married ever. But Dave and I knew from the beginning, and we, of course, waited a year to get married and got married the following April. Our wedding was beautiful. we had all of our kids up there with us during our ceremony, and it was just a beautiful day, and we had a good time. The night before, Jamie and Pat were at our house, and they put rice in our suitcase. Remember that when we got to Black Butte, where we had our honeymoon, there was rice in our suitcases and all this stuff. But it was a wonderful time. Jasmine and Samantha were our flower girls, and Sammy was so little she could barely walk. It was just a beautiful, beautiful wedding. Dave and I used to go to California a lot, and we would see Jamie and Pat and Jasmine and Samantha, and we'd bring Jasmine and Samantha home with us and keep them for a long time every summer. Or sometimes they'd come to our house and be with us. We spent a lot of time. We take the girls fishing and do different things like that. I think we took them down to a wildlife safari once and just did little trips. I think we did that on the way home to California. So we just had a really great time with those kids. Our granddaughters, they were very precious to both of us, still are. Of course, when I married David, we had Melissa and Scott. Once all of us went to California for Christmas, and we had Melissa and Scott. Melissa had graduated high school, so they were like 18 and 19 at the time, and we had our dog Molly. And Melissa had just had all her wisdom teeth pulled, so she was in the car in pain, and Scott and Melissa were in the back seat bickering like they were little kids. It was really quite the trip. But we got to California, and we had a great time at Jamie and Pat's with the girls and everything. And then on the way home, there was a freak snowstorm, which was pretty rare on the California coast because we were coming up 101. Anyway, that was one of the great memories I have. It was just a nice time in our life. We had, I kept working. David, we had the kids. And we visited, we saw Jamie and Pat. And we saw Billy would come over once in a while, and he was doing pretty well at that time. He had a girlfriend, Brenda. Not long after that, Jamie and Pat ended up getting divorced. They had moved to Grants Pass, and we had been back and forth to Grants Pass to see them there quite a bit too. And fortunately, they got a divorce. Things were not going well for them. So Jamie left Grants Pass and came to Vancouver. And it was just kind of neat. We had the kids close by. This is all, it's kind of hard to remember some of the stuff that happened in the right order, but things were a little hard for Jamie, I know, and for the kids, and for Bill, he was having a rough time too with his drug use. Not long after that, our daughter Melissa had her first baby, Rachel, in January of 1992, and we were lucky to be there when she was born. And I was right there in the room, and when Rachel came out, I said, "Oh, it's a girl, it's a girl, it's a girl." Even though I had two granddaughters, I was thrilled to get a third one. So we had our Rachel, and Melissa named her Rachel Elizabeth, which was quite an honor for me. And then in November of 1993, Stephanie Ann was born, and she was born in Corvallis because that's where Melissa and Rick were living at that time. And we went to Corvallis, and we got to be there for her birth because she didn't get here quite as soon as we thought she would. And we had another little girl, and we brought Stephanie and Melissa home to our house after that birth because of the circumstances. So we had the girls there. And Melissa then went back to work not long after that. And she was working in Portland at the steel company. And I remember one day I called home, and David was home with the girls I don't even know why he was home. But I called home, and David was pretty distraught because Rachel had pooped her diaper and was behind the living room chair, and Stephanie was crying. He wasn't sure what to do, but he made it through okay, and I came home and the things were fine, but anyway, we had some really special times with Rachel and Stephanie. They were at our house a lot, and when I retired, we had them every morning before and after school because I could babysit them. Jamie met Dave Parsley, and they got married. They had Isabel, who was a sweetie pie. I was there when Jamie gave birth to Isabel, and I was glad to be there because I had not made it for Jasmine and Samantha's birth, so it was wonderful to see Isabel, our fifth granddaughter, come into the world. And we were happy to get 5 granddaughters. I got cancer. That was a rough time. I had just retired, and I had a lump. I had an incident, and I was referred to an ear, nose, and throat doctor because of my throat swallowing. And he felt lumps in my neck, and he sent me in for biopsies, and it turned out I had cancer in my lymph nodes, and they found the cancer at the base of my tongue. And I was told that the kind of cancer I had, I probably wouldn't live more than 5 years. But they started aggressive treatment with chemotherapy and then radiation, and that was 13 years ago, and I'm still here, so I guess I'm very fortunate, although I've, of course, had, as all of you know, I've had a lot of problems because of radiation years later. After I was just out of treatment for cancer by about a year or so, and still very weak and still so tired, my son, Billy, got cirrhosis from the hepatitis that he'd contracted as a kid, and of course you don't know you have hepatitis until it's pretty far gone. And that was a really rough time. I took him for his treatments and stuff, and I was so hopeful that they would save his life, but they didn't. And I guess that was next to losing my mother and then my brother in a similar way to the way my mom died. Losing Billy, that was the hardest of all, because losing your own child is worse than losing anybody that you can imagine. After Billy died, we decided to move. David asked me, what have you always wanted to do? And I said, well, I've always wanted to live in a small town because, and he said, well, you know, we're not getting any younger. Let's just make a change. So we sold the farm property that we had, and we moved here to Ilwaco, and we built a home, and we really retired here, and we made a lot of good friends, and we had a pretty good time. You know, there are times when I wish we lived closer to Portland, but that's kind of what we've been, you know, that's what we've done. I really don't know what else to say. The other thing we have done, we did move Uncle Al here, which was really positive for him. He's made a lot of friends, and he's doing so much better. And from the time Uncle Al came home from the war, he's always been a very special person in my life. So, as of today, I don't know. My life has been maybe more good than bad. I started out very happy in life, and I had a lot of happy memories. I have a lot of sad memories, but everybody does. I have a family who I love and who loves me. I have 5 granddaughters, who I love with all my heart, and I hope that they'll all be happy and healthy. That's all I've ever wanted for my kids or grandkids. I have a beautiful great-grandson. I have a husband who adores me. He is the love of my life, and thank God I've got him. I guess that's kind of it. My granddaughter Isabel is doing this recording. She's been pushing me to do it. I'm hoping I've done an okay job. I think I've left out some things I should have mentioned, but this is my life. I wish my sister lived closer. I miss her terribly. Um, you know, it's the way of the world now. People are more scattered than we used to be. But I'm pretty happy here. I cancer and I was really afraid of dying. But I have to say that I've been very fortunate, and I have some highlights that have happened since then for sure. The first one was when Samantha and Ryan were married, and she had an absolutely gorgeous wedding in a beautiful setting, and she was a very beautiful bride. And of course, Little Kingston was part of their ceremony, and I was just happy to be there. And then last summer, which was 2013, Jasmine called us on a Sunday morning and said, geez, and Jasmine's a girl we thought at one point when Jasmine and I were in Paris together, she said she didn't think she'd ever get married. Well, she called on a Sunday morning last August and said, hey, Grampy, because he answered the phone, we want to get married at your house, and we want to do it next Sunday. Well, that was quite the adventure. I had just had surgery about a week and a half before that, and I wasn't feeling my best. But boy, did I rally. We pulled together a wedding that I think was really beautiful, and she was a gorgeous bride, and we were thrilled to have her get married at our house. And it just kind of capped a lot of times we've had with Jasmine and Samantha, and to say they're very special in our lives is just putting it very, very lightly. So I'm glad to be here after all these years, and I'm looking forward to seeing our other three girls get married, hopefully, and maybe have more babies. I love all our girls so much. I love my daughter Jamie and Melissa, and I love our girls, and I'm just hoping that I live a long time and get to watch them be married and have children. I love you. All right, well, Isabel's making me do this, but she's told me that I need to say if I could change one thing in my life, or even maybe several things, what would I change, and how would that make my life different from what it is now? So here's what I'm going to say. I probably would not get married or get pregnant at 16. But I would want my babies, so I'm not sure, how you manage that, but I would have liked to have waited till I was older. I would have finished school and maybe gone on to some college. And I would have married a man that was ready to be married, not a kid. That was the first thing I would have done. And my children would have all stayed healthy, and so I would have my son, and my kids would all be healthy and happy. And how would that change my life? It would make me not worry and worry about them like I do. And I guess I'd be happier if I wasn't worried about what my kids or grandkids might be going through. So that would be it. I would marry a man like David, right first out of the box, and my life would have been a lot different if I'd married someone like him to start out. I would spend more time doing what I want to do instead of what other people think I should do. I guess I'd maybe sit on my butt and read a lot of books if I had the time. I don't know. But basically, yeah, I would just start my life out a little different in my early years. That's it. My mother wouldn't be gone. The people I love would still be around, or would have stayed around a long time. If my mom had lived, I think things would have been a lot different too. So who knows? We don't know. It's just a chance we take. Life is to be lived. That I've learned. You try not to dwell on the past if you can help it. You try to move forward and make the best of that day. Every day is meant to be savored, because you don't know what can happen tomorrow. You know, you just need to take each day and live a day at a time. That's what I'm trying to do now. Some days are harder than others, but you just try to keep moving. You work hard and you earn your life, and you love those who love you, and just try to be the best person you can. I'm thrilled that Isabel's here right now. It's been a great time with her. I think that's it for now.